With Wavemaker, a big part of what we're looking at is, I guess we'd say we're journey obsessed. So it's really important for us to understand from a data-driven perspective the journey and the audiences that sort of make that up and where they sit on the journey. And so I think if you're going to start to take the time to understand that, you need to make sure that your content matches. So to serve one set of content or one size fits all approach just doesn't really work anymore, and it's very wasteful. So what we really look at is the role of content around the journey and matching that to the audience. The example I guess I'd give is if somebody really doesn't have a strong bias towards a brand and you decide to serve them sort of what we would call active phase content, utility content, ultimately that's wasted because they're not predisposed to picking you anyway. You really need to change their perception first and serve the right type of content. So it's a lot about customizing content to the platform and then starting to personalize the right type of content to the individual or the segment. We work in sort of multiple facets. It really depends on the client, some of their existing partnerships and what's best for them. There are definitely instances where we're creating new custom content, everything from what we call hero content to, as I mentioned, utility content. But there are others where we're taking existing content and assets from a client and strictly figuring out ways to make that atomized and customizing it to different platforms and then dialing up the different aspects that are needed for the individuals or the different segments. So some of it is just taking what's there and making it more effective for the platform and the individual, and some is creating totally new content. There's some of this that we're able to do through our own data and being able to sort of reach individuals at a very granular level. But in terms of the content itself, we can work with there's a lot of vendors out there now at this stage and partners that we use. VidMob is an example of one that we will use to customize and personalize. The example I'd give is IKEA. We did some work with them where essentially we knew we needed to communicate living rooms for them. They have a calendar for the year and they do different rooms at different times. So it needed to be living rooms, but what type of living room message did we need to serve to the different audiences that existed? So for one segment, it might be way more about quality and design. And so those are the things we drummed up about their living room message. Another, it might be way more about price and ease of putting it together, more utility content. And that's something that we then wound up customizing to that segment. But all taking their existing living room messaging and doing it. It can become very overwhelming for clients if they start to think about, wait, how many segments do I have? How many different types of creative do I really need? Is this all separate, completely different types? The reality is we try to make that as turnkey and sort of bite-sized for them as possible. You want to limit it to a certain number of meaningful segments that will actually help unlock growth for the brand. That could be 3, it could be 5 for argument's sake, but it's not creating completely different creative for each of those. Again, it's more customizing it, and that can be done pretty efficiently at scale with some of those partners that I mentioned, like a VidMob. At the end of the day, the proof point or the benchmark we have when we've looked across clients that we've done this with is roughly a 1.5 times increase in ROI. So when we start to look at that, whether that's through attribution modeling or longer term MMA, market mix modeling results, we see a significant increase in the overall ROI for them. That, or if we go more to a performance level, we've seen roughly a 2 times decrease in the cost per acquisition when we start to personalize and customize messaging. We actually have the largest consumer journey database of insights at this point through something called Wavemaker Momentum. That is 400,000 individual journeys that we have an understanding of across a host of categories and countries. So that data is sort of the starting point to help us segment and sub-segment audiences. And then M-Platform is something that we have that helps us to actually activate that journey at a very granular individual level. It allows us to create sort of a unified ID of those individuals, and then ultimately be able to reach them across devices and channels. That brings in first-party data, second, third, et cetera, and actually layers on a whole host of attributes that we have in addition to it to sort of create that full view of the consumer.